Some secrets aren't just buried. They fester, poisoning everything from beneath. For 25 years, my life, my marriage to Sarah, our comfortable Ohio home, our 3 children, was built over the rot of her calculated affair after we were married, and the sickening decades-long lie that our middle son, Ethan, was even mine. I accidentally unearthed this vile truth myself, hidden away like forgotten trash, then foolishly tried to shield my children from the poison. Only, for a random innocent DNA test they took for fun to detonate the bomb years later, it turned our adult children against her, obliterated our marriage in a quiet storm of lawyers and heartbreak, sent me fleeing the state just to breathe again, and left behind wreckage that superficial forgiveness could polish, but never, ever repair. The beginning of that bitter end, the moment the festering truth first touched the air, waited for me on a quiet Saturday afternoon, inside a forgotten cardboard box in the suffocating heat of the attic. Mark Harrison knelt on the creaky floorboards, surrounded by these decaying monuments to a life he thought he knew, tasked with a simple chore that would ultimately unravel everything. The late afternoon sun, the color of weak tea, slanted through the blinds of the attic window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. Sarah had asked him to clear out some space, a project he'd procrastinated on. He pulled out a heavy box labeled Sarah, College and Early Years. Inside, beneath faded sorority t-shirts and dog-eared textbooks, was a smaller, lacquered wooden box. He didn't recognize it. Morbid curiosity, perhaps a subconscious inkling that something was amiss beneath the placid surface of their lives, made him lift the lid. It held bundles of letters, tied with faded ribbons, and a few loose photographs. He picked up a photo. Sarah, younger, vibrant, laughing intimately with a handsome, dark-haired man he didn't know. An old boyfriend? No, the dates scrawled on. The back of some photos overlapped their early marriage. Then he started reading the letters. The handwriting was unmistakably Sarah's. They were addressed to Michael. His stomach plummeted. These weren't innocent memories. The dates confirmed his sickening suspicion. Some were from the first year of their marriage. He read about stolen moments, about burning passion intertwined with guilt and confusion. Flowery, youthful prose detailing a calculated betrayal. An affair. Not a youthful indiscretion before him, but a conscious choice to deceive him while building their life together. He felt bile rise in his throat. He remembered that year vividly, the crushing hours he worked establishing his contracting business, the exhaustion, the sacrifices made for their future. He remembered Sarah's occasional distance, her excuses about adjusting to marriage, missing friends, excuses he'd accepted without question, blinded by love and trust. What a fool he'd been, a trusting idiot. He forced himself to keep reading, driven by a desperate, self-destructive need to know the full, ugly extent of her deception. And then he found it. The letter that would shatter his world beyond recognition. Dated strategically, chillingly, just 9 months before Ethan was born. Sarah wrote to Michael about ending things, about choosing Mark, about a difficult decision finally made. But one line leaped out, searing itself into his brain. I don't know what I'll do if it's not Mark's, but I have to try. I have to make this work. Mark dropped the letter as if it were coated in acid. He sagged against a stack of dusty boxes, the attic air suddenly thick and unbreathable. Ethan. His quiet, introspective, artistic son. 21 years old. The child everyone always said favored Sarah's family so strongly. He'd never questioned it. It was easier not to. Easier to believe the comfortable lie. His mind became a frantic slideshow of Ethan's life. First steps. Shaky bike rides, proud graduation smiles, late-night talks, shared jokes. Every memory now felt contaminated, viewed through the warped lens of this devastating revelation. Was his entire fatherhood a fraud? The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the profound, ongoing deception woven into the very identity of their middle child, into the heart of their family. Olivia, 23, Chloe, 19, their beloved brother, a product of their mother's infidelity. His heart felt like stone. Hot, angry tears blurred his vision. His first instinct was raw fury, to charge downstairs, to confront Sarah, to unleash the hurricane of pain and rage building inside him. But the image of Ethan stopped him cold. What would this knowledge do to him? Ethan, already navigating the fragile landscape of young adulthood, finding his place in the world, to rip away the foundation of his identity, to tell him the man he called Dad shared no blood with him. The potential devastation was unthinkable. And Olivia and Chloe? Their worlds would fracture too. Their image of their mother, their family, history irrevocably damaged. He sat there for what felt like an eternity, enveloped by the gathering gloom as the sun dipped below the roofline. He made the decision then, the foolish, gut-wrenching decision foreshadowed in the dark summary already playing out in his mind. He couldn't destroy Ethan. He couldn't detonate the bomb himself. He would swallow the poison, carry this corrosive secret alone. He meticulously repacked the damning evidence, letters, photos, into the small wooden box, closed it, and buried it deep within the larger cardboard container, shoving it back into the darkest corner of the attic like hiding. A corpse. He forced himself downstairs, composing his features into a mask of weary normality, the crushing weight of the secret settling upon him, a shroud he would wear for months. Those months became a masterclass in strained pretense. Mark moved through his life like a ghost haunting his own home. Looking Sarah in the eye felt like staring into the face of deceit. Her touch felt like a brand. Every shared meal, every casual conversation, every family gathering was hollow, underscored by the silent scream of his knowledge. He poured himself into work, seeking refuge in long hours and physical labor, anything to avoid the suffocating atmosphere of his own house. He grew quieter, his responses clipped, his smiles forced. Sarah, seemingly oblivious, noticed the change. "Mark, what's wrong?" she'd ask, her voice laced with what sounded like genuine concern, which only twisted the knife deeper. "You're so withdrawn. Is it work stress?" "Just tired, Sarah," he'd mutter, the lie scraping his throat raw. Busy season. Each repetition felt like another layer of grime coating his soul. His interactions with the children became fraught with a painful new awareness. Watching Ethan, his heart ached with a confusing mix of fierce love and the jarring knowledge of biological disconnect. He found himself scrutinizing Ethan's features, gestures, talents, searching for links that weren't there, while simultaneously trying to act completely normal. He occasionally overcompensated, suggesting outings or projects, his efforts feeling clumsy and transparent, at least to himself. Ethan sometimes looked at him with a thoughtful, puzzled expression, but, perhaps sensing the fragility beneath his father's demeanor, didn't press. Olivia, perceptive and home from grad school that summer, sensed the frost between her parents. "Things seem tense, Dad," she ventured one evening. "Are you and Mom okay?" "We're fine, honey," Mark lied, unable to burden her, unwilling to crack the facade. "Just the usual." Chloe, busy with college life, seemed less attuned to the subtle shift, chalking it up to midlife doldrums. Life limped along under this cloud of unspoken truth. Mark felt utterly alone, trapped in a marriage that felt like a cruel mockery, bound by his desperate, perhaps misguided need to protect his children, especially Ethan. He sometimes caught Sarah watching him, a question in her eyes, but she never voiced it. Her apparent ignorance felt like another layer of betrayal. Had their connection become so tenuous that she couldn't sense his profound anguish? The catalyst for the inevitable detonation arrived disguised as a birthday gift. Chloe, turning 20, received an Ancestry DNA kit. "Hey, this could be awesome," she announced during a family dinner, waving the colorful box. "Let's all do it. Find out if we're related to Charlemagne or if we really do have Viking blood like Grandpa always claimed." Mark's insides turned to ice. He wanted to shout, "No," to throw the box away, but any objection would seem bizarre, suspicious. He mumbled an excuse. "You guys go ahead. I know my side. Boring farmers from County Cork. Save your spit." Sarah laughed, readily agreeing. "Sounds like fun. Maybe we'll find some exciting cousins." Olivia, intrigued by the health reports often included, was also game. Ethan, initially indifferent, was swept up by his sister's enthusiasm. All right, he conceded with a smile. "But I'm claiming diplomatic immunity if we find out we're related to Neanderthals." The kits were completed, mailed off. Weeks crawled by. Mark lived with a low-grade dread humming beneath the surface. Then the emails began to arrive. Chloe confirmed her expected British Isles Scandinavian mix. Olivia's results mirrored her sister's, highlighting their shared parentage. Ethan received his results on a quiet Tuesday evening. Mark found him later, sitting alone on the back porch swing as twilight bled into night, staring intently at his phone screen. The usual easygoing light in Ethan's eyes was replaced by a deep, troubled confusion. "Everything okay, Eth?" Mark asked, his voice tight, despite his effort to sound casual. Ethan looked up slowly, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning fear. "Dad, this DNA report, it's wrong, or something." Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. "Here it comes." "Wrong how?" "Well," Ethan fumbled with his phone, showing Mark the screen. "It shows Mom's side, the Miller heritage, clear as day. Matches up with relatives, but the paternal side, it's completely different from Liv and Chloe's. It doesn't share the key markers. And, look," he pointed. "It says I have a significant percentage of Italian ancestry. Where would that come from? We don't have any Italian in the family, do we?" The carefully constructed dam inside Mark finally broke. The secret he had carried, the burden that had been crushing him, was out, dragged into the light by impartial science. He couldn't lie anymore. Not to Ethan. He sank onto the swing beside his son, the silence thick with unspoken horror. "Ethan," Mark began, his voice raspy with emotion. "There's something I found out a few months ago. Something I didn't know how to tell you." Ethan's eyes locked onto his, searching, already piecing together the impossible. Mark took a ragged breath. "Your mother, very early in our marriage, before you were born, she had an affair." The words felt like tearing flesh. "And Ethan, the man she had the affair with, he is your biological father. I'm not." Ethan stared, his face completely drained of color. The DNA results on his phone, Mark's anguished confession. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. He didn't speak, just shook his head almost imperceptibly, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek as his world fractured around him. "I found some old letters," Mark explained, his voice choked. "Hidden away. I didn't want you to find out like this, Ethan, I swear. I didn't want you hurt. I didn't want..." Ethan flinched slightly as Mark reached for his shoulder, the movement, born of shock rather than rejection. "So, my whole life?" he whispered, the question hanging in the air like a death sentence. "You are my son, Ethan," Mark insisted fiercely, leaning closer. "You hear me? Biology doesn't change 21 years. It doesn't change who raised you, who loves you. It changes nothing about how I feel." But Ethan was shaking his head again, looking utterly lost, shattered. "Who?" The question was barely audible. Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. "His name was Michael. That's all I know. The letters didn't give a last name or any other details. Ethan surged to his feet, his phone clattering unnoticed onto the porch boards. He looked wildly towards the warm glow of the house, a symbol of the cozy lie he'd lived in. "Mom," he breathed, his voice gaining a hard edge of nascent anger. "Does she know that I know now?" "No," Mark said softly. "Just us." Ethan's gaze fixed on the back door, his expression hardening into a mask of pain and resolve. "Not for long," he vowed, turning and walking numbly towards the house, leaving Mark alone in the gathering darkness, the terrible relief of the shared secret instantly replaced by the dread of the imminent, unavoidable confrontation. The explosion occurred later that night. Ethan, pale but resolute, had informed Olivia and Chloe. Their shock quickly morphed into protective fury on Ethan's behalf, coalescing into a unified wave of anger directed at their mother. They waited, a grim tribunal, in the living room. Mark stood near the entrance, a silent, heartbroken observer, knowing his presence was necessary but dreading the scene. Sarah came downstairs, humming softly, ready to call it a night. She stopped, short, sensing the oppressive atmosphere instantly. "What's going on?" she asked, her gaze flicking between the stony faces of her children. "Ethan? Honey, you look awful. Are you sick?" "I got my DNA results, Mom," Ethan said, his voice chillingly flat, devoid of warmth. Sarah's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of apprehension. "Oh? Any royal blood?" she tried, a weak attempt at levity. "I found out I'm part Italian," Ethan stated, his eyes drilling into hers. "And I found out that Dad..." He gestured towards Mark, the word Dad catching painfully in his throat. "That Mark isn't my biological father." The color vanished from Sarah's face. She visibly staggered, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a cry. Her eyes darted, desperately towards Mark, finding no comfort, only the confirmation of his long-held silent knowledge reflected in his weary, sorrowful gaze. He knew. He had known all along. "How?" she whispered, turning back to Ethan, her world collapsing. "How could you?" Chloe erupted, her voice sharp with betrayal. "How could you lie to all of us? To Dad? To Ethan? For his entire life? What kind of person does that? It wasn't..." "I didn't mean..." Sarah stammered, tears instantly flooding her eyes. "I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake years and years ago." "A mistake?" Olivia repeated, her voice dripping with contempt, arms crossed, tightly. "You had an affair after you married Dad. You got pregnant, and you let him raise Ethan, believing. You let us believe." She choked on the words. "I loved your father," Sarah cried, turning pleading eyes to Mark. "I chose him. Michael. It was weakness, stupidity. I was young, I panicked. When I found out I was pregnant, I hoped so desperately he was Mark's, and he looked enough like my family." Her voice dissolved into choked sobs. "It was easier to believe the lie. I convinced myself." "Easier?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet, cutting through her hysterics. "Easier for who, Mom? Easier than telling the truth? Easier than letting the man who raised me know I wasn't his blood? Easier than letting me know the fundamental truth about my own existence? I didn't want to hurt anyone." Sarah wept, collapsing onto the sofa in a heap of guilt and self-pity. "I thought I was protecting us. Protecting our family. Mark, please, say something." Mark looked at her, his face a mask of profound exhaustion and sorrow. The anger had burned out months ago, leaving only ashes. "There's nothing left to protect, Sarah," he said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of finality. "You broke it, years ago. The foundation was rotten from the start, and now, it's just rubble." Sarah looked from Mark's empty eyes to the faces of her children. Olivia's cold judgment, Chloe's undisguised anger, Ethan's devastating quiet pain, and saw the full extent of the irreparable damage. She buried her face in her hands, her body racked with the useless sobs of someone confronting the consequences of their actions far too late. The confession, ugly and raw, hung in the poisoned air. The family Mark had sacrificed his peace to preserve, the secret he had carried like a tumor, had finally, irrevocably, imploded. The aftermath was less fiery explosion, more slow, suffocating collapse. Mark moved into a nondescript apartment across town. Divorce proceedings began, handled with numb efficiency by lawyers. There were no dramatic arguments over possessions. The emotional stakes dwarfed any material concerns. They filed under Ohio's no-fault grounds, irreconcilable differences, a bland euphemism for a betrayal so profound it had rendered reconciliation laughable. Adultery, while grounds, felt irrelevant. The core issue was the deep, calculated deception, especially concerning Ethan. Olivia, Ethan, and Chloe, all adults, navigated the wreckage with a united front. Their relationship with their mother became one of strained civility. The easy warmth, the implicit trust that had defined their interactions, evaporated, replaced by a cautious, painful distance. They couldn't reconcile the loving mother they remembered with the woman capable of such a long-term, fundamental lie. Their hurt was palpable, not just for Mark, but for the violation of their own sense of family and identity. They rallied around, Mark offering quiet support, though even that relationship was subtly altered, shadowed by the shared trauma and the difficult knowledge of the secret he had kept. Ethan bore the brunt of the identity crisis. He felt like a stranger in his own life, questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. While he felt deep sympathy and love for Mark, the man who had been his steadfast father in every way that mattered, an undeniable awkwardness now existed, a constant awareness of the biological lie he'd unknowingly lived. He expressed no desire to find Michael. His pain and anger were focused squarely on Sarah's deception. Sarah rattled around the large family home alone, the silence amplifying her isolation. Friends offered initial condolences, but gradually drifted away, uncomfortable with the messy reality of the situation. Guilt and regret became her constant companions. She replayed her choices, her justifications, seeing them now in the harsh light of their devastating consequences. A few months after the divorce finalized, Mark knew he couldn't stay in Ohio. The town itself felt contaminated by memories, every street corner a potential reminder of the shattered life. He sold his share of the business, packed the few belongings that felt truly his, and told his children he was moving to Colorado. He craved anonymity, distance, the clean, impersonal majesty of the mountains. The goodbyes were tear-soaked, but understanding. "Visit often, Dad. Call us constantly," Olivia insisted, clinging to him. "Always," he promised, his voice thick. He hugged Chloe tightly. Then he faced Ethan. "You're my son," he stated, meeting Ethan's eyes, pouring every ounce of conviction he had into the words. "Biology doesn't change that. Not for me. Ever." Ethan nodded, unable to speak, gripping Mark in a fierce hug that conveyed more than words. Mark drove west, leaving behind the ruins of his marriage and the fractured lives of his children, searching for a place where the ghosts wouldn't whisper his failures around every corner. Olivia, Ethan, and Chloe were left behind. Young adults forced to navigate their futures carrying the heavy burden of their family's fractured past. Their mother a source of deep disappointment. Their father a loving but distant figure rebuilding his life from ashes, years unspooled. Mark found a measure of peace in Colorado, embracing the rugged landscape and the quiet solitude. He maintained steady contact with his children through calls, texts, and visits, both his to them and theirs to him. The bond endured, woven from shared history and genuine love, yet forever underscored by the sadness of what had been lost, what had been revealed. Sarah remained in Ohio, a solitary figure in the house that was once filled with family life. Slowly, tentatively, she began to reach out, letters filled with remorse, hesitant phone calls, apologies that never excused, but only explained her fear and weakness. Time, as it does, began to blunt the sharpest edges of the pain. Spurred perhaps by a reluctant empathy, or the simple exhaustion of holding on to anger, the children cautiously allowed her back into the periphery of their lives. Occasional, carefully orchestrated lunches. More frequent, though still guarded phone calls. Acknowledgement of birthdays, holidays. Nearly 5 years after the DNA results shattered their world, Sarah flew to Colorado for Thanksgiving. Olivia, Ethan, and Chloe had all gathered at Mark's modest rented house. The air was thick with unspoken history, the conversation carefully navigating safe topics, careers, weather, neutral memories. It was awkward, fragile, but they managed to share a meal under the same roof. As Sarah prepared to leave, bundled against the early snow, she approached Mark on the porch. "Mark," she began, her voice unsteady. "I know sorry is inadequate, completely, but I am sorry for everything, more than I can ever express." Mark watched the snowflakes drift down for a long moment before meeting her gaze. His expression was distant, weary. "I know you are, Sarah," he replied quietly. Acceptance, perhaps, but not absolution. She sought forgiveness from each child, individually, tearfully acknowledging the depth of the wounds she had inflicted, and, in their own time, in their own ways, they granted it. They forgave the human frailty, the fear, the catastrophic mistake made decades ago. But forgiveness, they all discovered, wasn't a magical eraser. It couldn't restore the shattered trust, or rebuild the foundation that had crumbled. The relationships, though cautiously resumed, were forever changed, fundamentally altered. A scar remained, a subtle but persistent reminder of the fault line running through their history. They could forgive the person, but they couldn't forget the betrayal or undo its consequences. They existed in the aftermath, navigating a new reality built on painful honesty rather than comfortable deceit, forever marked by the vile secret unearthed from a dusty box, a taint that time and forgiveness could soften, but never truly cleanse.